The air inside the colossal chamber of the Galactic Commons did not move. It was processed, filtered, and utterly still. Yet Ambassador Kim Ji-ho felt it pressing against his skin like a weight. He stood alone on the petitioner's podium, a small circle of polished stone floor that felt more like a target. Arrayed before him in sweeping, tiered arcs were the delegates of 100 star-faring species. Their eyes, or the sensory organs that served as eyes, were fixed on him. The judgment had already been passed. This was just the formal sentencing. On the vast holographic dome above, the image of Earth spun slowly, a beautiful swirl of blue and white and green. Overlaid upon it, glowing with a harsh red light, was the single, damning glyph, Pariah. The word seemed to pulse in time with Ji-ho's own heartbeat. The Zelenare ambassador, a being of slender grace and skin like brushed mercury, was finishing her remarks. Her voice was like wind chimes, beautiful and cold. The evidence of their destructive nature is etched into their own history. Observe. The hologram shifted to show grainy, ancient footage, trenches and explosions from a world war, the fiery bloom of nuclear tests. This propensity for violence is not a relic. It is a core trait. They bring this chaos to the stars. Next, the Grux representative heaved itself up. It looked like a walking mountain of basalt, its voice a deep grind of stone on stone. The humans do not respect the natural order. They see a resource, and they seize it. They mined the asteroid cluster in the Kyrios belt, which we of the Grux had been observing for 900 of your years. It was a geological meditation. They turned it into slag and fuel. Ji-ho listened, his face a calm mask. He had prepared for this. He had files of data showing human conservation efforts, centuries of peace, the philosophical leaps that followed their early dark ages. But looking at the assembly, he knew facts were not what they wanted. They wanted a story, and they had already chosen the one that fit their fears. Humanity's rise had been too fast. From radio signals to warp drive in a blink of galactic time. It scared the older, slower species. Our passion, our loudness, our endless arguing and creating and breaking and rebuilding, it was all too much. To them, it was not vitality. It was a dangerous fever. The final vote was called. Lights flickered across the chamber-cool blues and greens for the affirmative, condemning vote. A few warm yellows of dissent were swallowed by the overwhelming majority. The ruling was confirmed. Humanity was placed under galactic stewardship. All beyond Sol travel required a commons observer. Trade was restricted to approved essentials. The human fleet, what little of it existed, was to be docked and its drives monitored. It was a cage made of rules and watchful eyes dot as the glyph over Earth burned brighter. Ji-ho was expected to speak some final words. He looked out, not at the hostile faces of the Zelenare or Grux, but at the quieter delegates. The gentle, aquatic Rillians who had once shared songs with the human deep-sea team. The avian Cathar, who understood the human drive to explore every mountain. In their postures, he did not see hatred. He saw disappointment. A profound, sad disappointment, as if a promising student had been caught stealing. That hurt more than the anger. He leaned toward the mic, his voice steady but quiet in the vast room. "You see the fire," he said, the translator carrying his words to every ear. "And you fear will burn your house down. You do not ask why we learn to make fire in the cold, dark night. You do not ask what predators it keeps away. You only see the flame and condemn it." He gave a small, formal bow and left the podium. The silence behind him was absolute. The walk through the gleaming alien corridors to the docking bay was long. His aide, a young man named Park Min-soo, walked beside him, fuming. They used footage from 200 years ago. They ignored all our submissions on the Great Pacific Cleanup, the Mars Terraforming Accords. It's not fair. Fair is a concept for games, Minsu, Ji-ho said, his steps never faltering. This is politics. They built a narrative, and we are the villains in it. They reached the airlock of the Guangzhou, a modest human frigate that looked blocky and crude next to the elegant, organic-looking ships of the other species. The hatch sealed behind them with a comforting hiss of familiar air. The hum of human-made engines was a low, steady song. On the bridge, Captain Lee Soo-min was waiting. She was a woman of few words, her black hair pulled back in a severe bun, her eyes missing nothing. She looked from Ji-ho's composed face to Min-su's furious one. So, the cage is locked. It is, Ji-ho said, sinking into the co-pilot's chair. He watched on the viewport as the Galactic Commons Station, a magnificent wheel of light and life, began to recede. They have all the data, all the reports. They see our wars, but not the hospitals we built after. They see our minds, but not the gardens we grow on barren rock. They see the storm, Soo-min. Soo-min's hands danced over the controls, plotting the slow, approved course back to the solar system. But they never ask, she said, finishing his earlier thought, what the storm protects. He nodded. Exactly. They live in a universe they believe is orderly, or can be made orderly. We are a reminder that chaos exists. That change can be violent and fast. They hate that reminder. The Guangzhou moved into the serene darkness of warp space, leaving the politics and the judgment behind. On the bridge, the mood was grim, but not defeated. Ji-ho pulled up a file on his personal screen. It was not a diplomatic report. It was a series of images. The Laura 3 research colony, run by the peaceful Vespirans, had gone quiet last week. Just a routine comms blackout, the Commons said. But the Guangzhou's long-range scanners, built by paranoid human engineers who always wanted to see a little farther than anyone else, had caught a strange energy decay signature in the last broadcast. It was odd. It matched nothing in the galactic database. Zoom in, Ji-ho said, turning his screen toward her. This signal from the rim, the official report, calls it a reactor malfunction. She glanced at it, her eyes narrowing. That's not a meltdown signature. That's an unraveling. She looked at him. You think it's connected to why they're so eager to clip our wings? I think they are afraid of many things, Ji-ho said quietly. And I am starting to wonder if the thing they should be most afraid of is something they cannot understand. Something that perhaps only a messy, adaptable, chaotic species might be able to face. He closed the file. For now, they were pariahs, confined to their home system. But as the stars streaked by the viewport, Kim Ji-ho allowed himself a single quiet thought. The galaxy had built its walls high and its rules strict to keep the dangerous humans out. He wondered what would happen when something truly dangerous came in, and the only ones who could fight it were locked in a cage. The silence that followed humanity's pariah status was not peaceful. It was the tense, watchful quiet of a prison block. Within the solar system, human ships went about their approved business, shadowed by sleek, silent observer vessels from the Galactic Commons. The mood on Earth and its colonies was a mixture of anger, shame, and stubborn defiance. Ambassador Kim Ji-ho spent his days in his office on Luna, filing endless, polite appeals that he knew were being deleted unread. A standard. Year had crawled by when the silence broke. It began as a shiver in the galactic net, the faster-than-light communication web that bound civilized space. A Priority 1 distress pulse, originating from the Lyra 3 research colony. Lyra 3 was a quiet, lush world, under the stewardship of the Vespirans, a species so deeply pacifist and revered that an attack on them was unthinkable. The signal was visual, showing a Vespiran scientist, their delicate, fern-like fronds trembling. The silence. It eats the light, It does not speak. It just unmakes. Please, he? The transmission dissolved into a scream of static that sounded wrong. A digital sound that felt organic. A dry, crumbling noise. The Commons reacted with swift, coordinated concern. A multi-species investigation fleet, led by the formidable Zelenari and protected by Gruk shield ships, was assembled within days. It was a display of galactic unity, a stark contrast to the treatment of humanity. The official bulletins were calm, assuring all citizens that the situation was under control. A reactor accident, perhaps. A rare planetary pathogen. On the edge of the sector, far from the important worlds, was the human monitoring outpost Mokpo. Its job was boring. Watch the empty space near the human quarantine line and report any anomalies. Captain Lee Soo-min had been assigned there after the Guangzhou was impounded. She saw the official fleet blaze past on long-range sensors, a glittering armada of order and power. Look at them go, her communications specialist, Park Jun, muttered. He was young, with a mind that saw patterns in noise. Not even a glance our way. Would you? Soo-min replied, her eyes on the data stream. But something about the distress signal nagged at her. She had accessed the raw, unprocessed packet, the one before the Commons cleaners had smoothed it for public consumption. June, run the raw Lyra signal through our deep spectrum analyzer, the one we built to listen for comet dust. Look for shadows. June shrugged. Won't find anything their fancy tech didn't. But he set to work. Human tech was a patchwork. It was built from old ideas, repurposed equipment, and a stubborn refusal to throw anything away. The deep spectrum analyzer was partly built from a repurposed medical MRI. It didn't just listen. It felt for the echo of things. Hours later, as the official fleet established orbit around Lyra 3, June let out a low whistle. Captain, you need to see this. On his screen was not an image, but a rendering of data. The static from the end of the Vespiron message wasn't random. When graphed, it showed a perfect, repeating decay pattern. A mathematical signature of something coming apart at the most fundamental level. It's in the background of the whole signal, June said, his face pale. Like a whisper underneath their words. Getting stronger. It's not a pathogen. It's not an explosion. It's a pattern. A pattern of things becoming not things. Soo-min leaned in, her heart cold. Can you tell what it targets? Everything, June whispered. The signal shows it in the Vesperians' biosigns, in the power grid of their lab, in the light waves. It's a disassembly protocol for organized matter and energy. A universal deconstructor. They watched the live feed from the official fleet. The Zelenari commander was announcing a cautious, phased landing. Soo-min made a decision. She opened a tight beam, low probability channel directly to the fleet's command frequency. It was a breach of a dozen protocols. Commons Fleet. This is Captain Lee Soo-min of the human outpost Mokpo. We have analyzed a subsignature in the Lyra 3 distress call. We believe you are facing a non-biological, pattern-based contaminant. Advise extreme caution with all systems, including your own. Recommend remote scanning only. The pause was long. Then a cool, Zelenari voice replied. Human vessel Mokpo, your transmission is noted. Your analysis is not on the approved Commons threat matrix. Stand down and observe your quarantine protocols. Do not interrupt this channel again. The link cut off. June looked at her, helpless. They didn't listen. On the screen, the first Zelenari shuttle, beautiful and silver, descended into Lyra 3's green atmosphere. It reached the research colony's landing pad. For a moment, all was normal. Then, the shuttle's live feed flickered. The lush, green plants visible behind the colony dome seemed to gray, not die, not wilt. They lost their color, their texture, becoming a flat, ash-like substance. The effect spread like a wave. The Zelenari on the shuttle reported, their wind chime voices now sharp with alarm. "We are detecting a field. It is interacting with our shield harmonics. Attempting to..." The feed dissolved. Not into black, but into that same terrible, crumbly static. The static whispered for a full minute before the link went dead. Panic erupted on the fleet channel. A Grux heavy ship moved to provide cover, its massive shields flaring to life. The gray wave, invisible to normal sensors, but clear on the Mokpo's jerry-rigged scanner, touched the edge of that mighty energy field. The shield didn't shatter. It simply came apart. The energy dissipated not in an explosion, but in a sigh, turning into a faint, inert mist. The grayness crawled up the shield, towards the ship's hull. The fleet commander ordered a retreat. But for two of the ships, it was too late. The silent scourge reached them. Their systems failed not with sparks, but with silence. Their hulls didn't breach. They merely dulled, then began to flake away into nothingness. The last transmissions were not screams, but the desperate, confused sounds of beings trying to understand why their world was dissolving around them. Then static. On the bridge of the Mokpo, there was only horror. The Great Armada, the symbol of galactic order, was broken. 1/3 of its ships were gone, reduced to dust and echoes. The rest were fleeing in a ragged, terrified scramble. The main Commons channel, broadcast to all civilizations, was a cacophony of fear. Then a new, official voice came on, strained but trying for calm. A state of emergency is declared. The phenomenon at Lyra 3 is designated a Class 10 silent threat. All systems are to enact strict quarantine. All non-essential travel is suspended. June looked at his captain, his eyes wide. They don't have a plan. They're just building a bigger wall. Su Min was staring at the scanner readout of the Scourge. It was perfect. It analyzed, then deconstructed, orderly, logical, a machine for creating nothing. "It understands them," she said softly. "It understands their perfect shields, their clean energy matrices, their logical systems. It knows exactly how to take them apart." A strange, cold realization dawned on her. She turned to June. "Archive all our scan data. Every weird frequency, every shadow. Then scrub it from our main server. Hide it in the old entertainment drives. In the junk files. Why?" June asked. "Because," Su Min said, looking at the receding speck of light that was Lyra 3, now a tomb hidden in a cloud of gray, the thing that just ate the galaxy's best and brightest. "It might not understand our junk." Panic, cold and silent, seeped through the galactic commons. The silent scourge was not a fire to be fought. It was a tide of erasure. Quarantine zones fell. The scourge did not attack like a weapon. It simply arrived, and things ceased to be. Planets did not explode. They grayed out, pixel by pixel, into inert dust. Ships that tried to fight found their beams absorbed, their shields unraveled, their very hulls disintegrating into a fine, silent powder. It was a perfect counter to a perfect civilization. It learned, it adapted, and it unmade. Emergency sessions of the Commons were now shrouded in secrecy and fear. The elegant chamber was half empty, delegates attending via unstable hologram from safe distances. Arguments were sharp and desperate. The Grux proposed building a wall of focused gravity, a monumental project that would take years. The Zelenari suggested finding the Scourge's origin point in ancient records, a task for centuries. Meanwhile, 3 more outpost worlds went silent. It was a junior delegate, a young Vespiran named Kaler, who voiced the unthinkable. His people had suffered the first loss, and his voice carried a new, hard edge. We have tried purity of energy. We have tried perfection of form. The scourge understands these things and devours them. It is a predator of order. He paused, the gathered delegates hanging on his words. There is one species whose technology is not pure, whose systems are not orderly, whose very thought patterns are adaptive, chaotic. They fight chaos with chaos. A murmur of disapproval rippled through the chamber. The Grux delegates slammed the stony fist. You propose we unleash the humans. The pariahs? Their destructive nature would compound this disaster. Would it? Kaler pressed, his image flickering. The scourge consumes logical systems. Human systems are famously illogical. They mix technologies from different eras. They use outdated code for sentimental reasons. Their ships are held together with what they call duct tape and hope. Perhaps the scourge cannot digest a meal, so inconsistent. The debate was furious and lasted for days. But as the gray frontier crept closer to the core systems, desperation won. A tightly controlled, heavily monitored mission was authorized. The humans would be allowed one ship, armed for science, not war, to approach the Lyra 3 quarantine zone. They would be observed every moment. It was less a trust and more a throwing of a strange object at an unknown problem. The call reached Luna. Ambassador Kim Ji-ho listened to the terse, humiliating terms. No sovereignty. No command. Human crew only, with a remote kill switch controlled by the Commons. He accepted. There was no other choice. The ship chosen was the Bison, a retrofit deep space research vessel. Its captain was Lee Soo-min, pulled from her exile at the Mokpo. Her first officer was Park Jun, the specialist who had first seen the scourge's pattern. The lead scientist was Dr. Choi Hana, a xenopathologist whose theories were considered radical even by human standards. She believed diseases, and by extension any destructive pattern, could be confused, distracted, and bored into submission. The crew was a collection of misfits and geniuses. Engineer Lee Dae-hyun was famous for using a guitar's feedback loop to recalibrate a warp coil. If it's stupid, but it works, it's not stupid, was his motto. They were given the data from the Mokpo, the strange shadows in the static. On the bridge of the Bizon, Soo-min looked at the feed from the Commons observer ship, a sleek Zelenari vessel that hung just outside weapons range. Happy to have an audience? Ji-ho asked over the comm, his voice dry. It's motivating, Soo-min replied. Jun, Hana, what's our plan? We can't fight it. Dr. Hana, her eyes focused on a screen showing the scourge fractal decay pattern, spoke softly. We don't fight. We irritate. The scourge is a perfect analyzer. To unmake something, it must first completely understand its pattern. Its flaw is that it must complete the analysis. She pulled up Dae-hyun's schematic for the ship's modified shields. So we give it nonsense to analyze. Shield harmonics that change at random, based on a random number generator seeded by the crew's heart rates and yesterday's cafeteria menu. Energy outputs that pulse in irregular intervals. We make our ship a chaotic, unpredictable mess. Dae-hyun grinned, patting a console wired to an old analog synthesizer. The noisier, the better. It's like trying to listen to a single conversation in a crowded, loud room. It'll give the scourge a headache. The Bison approached the edge of the gray zone. Where Lyra the Third had been, there was now a fuzzy, dull sphere, like a erased pencil drawing. The Zelenari observer ship stayed far back, its perfect lines tense. Human vessel Bison, you are at the threshold. Proceed with caution. We are monitoring. Soo-min took a breath. Activating chaotic shielding. All systems to non-standard protocols. The Bison's engine hum changed, becoming a warbling, uneven thrum. The shield emitter glowed not with a steady light, but with a flickering rainbow pattern. They crossed the threshold. Immediately, sensors screamed. The scourge was not a thing they could see, but they could feel its attention. It was like a pressure, a silent hum that sought order. It touched their chaotic shield. On the observer ship, the Zelenari science officer reported in confusion. The human vessel's energy signature is erratic, inefficient. It is wasting 80% of its power output on meaningless fluctuations. The scourge field is engaging with it, but it is not penetrating. It is forming complex, shifting patterns around the hull. It seems to be studying the noise. Inside the Bison, lights flickered. A low, grinding vibration filled the air. It's trying to find the pattern in our madness, Hana said, watching her screens. It's building 1,000 different models and discarding them. It's working overtime. Good, Sumin said, her hands steady on the controls. Take us down. Low orbit. The descent into Lyra 3's atmosphere was a ride through a silent nightmare. The world below was a monochrome sketch. Forests were flat gray smudges. Mountains were dust piles. There was no wind, no sound, no life. Just an awful, complete stillness. They landed near the ruins of the main research colony. The gray dust was ankle-deep, but it was inert. The scourge had moved on. In the dead quiet, a team suited up. Dr. Hana, June, and Dae Hyan stepped onto the surface. Their boots made no sound. Inside a half-unmade lab, June found a partially dissolved data core. Using a handheld scanner wired to a music player, he managed to extract fragments. The last log entries were not just from the Vespirans, but from the Zelenari ground team. The scourge had taken them apart, slowly, system by system, as it meticulously learned them. Hana, however, found something else. A biological sample from a native Lyran plant, sealed in a stasis field that had, ironically, failed in a messy, power-fluctuating way just before the scourge hit. The plant inside was not gray. It was dead, but it was still green. The chaotic failure of the stasis field had rendered the sample uninteresting to the scourge. It was like a typo in a perfect sentence, ignored. It doesn't see the mess, Hana whispered over the comms to Sumin on the bridge. It only sees things that make perfect sense. Our shield isn't defeating it. Our chaos is just invisible to it until it looks too closely and gets confused. Can we weaponize confusion? Sumin asked Dae-Hyan, poking at a grayed-out console that crumbled at his touch, laughed. We need a bigger noisemaker. A broadcast. Something so loud, so stupid, so brilliantly pointless that it shorts out its brain. We need to give the whole scourge a nervous breakdown. As they spoke, the observer ship's voice crackled in, strained. Bizan, our long-range scans show the scourge field is beginning to recohere around your position. It is adapting to the chaotic input. You have minutes, not hours. Recommend immediate withdrawal. The team scrambled back to the ship. As the Bison lifted off from the dead world, the gray mist below began to stir, swirling with new, more complex patterns aimed at understanding the annoying, noisy gnat that had disturbed its silence. On the bridge, streaked with dust, Hana looked at the data. They had a principle, chaos as a shield. But Dae-Hyan was right. To stop the scourge, they needed to do more than hide. They needed to scream at it. And to do that, they would need the biggest speaker in the galaxy. The Bison returned from the gray edge of death not to cheers, but to a silent, watchful dread. The data they carried was a fever dream of contradictions. The Galactic Commons science teams, masters of perfect logic, stared at the human findings with a kind of horrified confusion. Chaotic shielding? The scourge being confused by inefficiency? It was like suggesting one could stop a flood By throwing confetti at it, Ambassador Kim Ji-ho presented the findings in a bare, secure chamber. Only a few key delegates were present, their holograms sharp with tension. The Scourge is a cognitive weapon, Dr. Choi Hana explained, her image beside Ji-ho's. It analyzes, then deconstructs. Its weakness is its need for a perfect model. Our imperfect systems slow it down. It must work harder to understand them. We believe we can overload it. The Grux delegate's stony face was unreadable. Overload it with what? More of your noise? Engineer Lee Dae-hyen's grin was visible on the feed. Yes, but not just any noise. The noisiest noise we have. Our culture. Our art. Our history. It's a mess of contradictions. Happy songs about sad things. Sad songs about happy things. Paintings that look like nothing. Stories that don't end. Philosophy that argues with itself for fun. We broadcast it all, scrambled up, right into the heart of the Scourge. It'll try to find the meaning, the pattern. It won't ever find one. It'll get stuck in a loop until it burns itself out. There was a long, heavy silence. The Zelenary delegate finally spoke, her voice thin. You wish to inject this cultural corruption into a galactic-scale ontological weapon? This is not a strategy. This is vandalism. It is the only thing that has worked. Captain Lee Soo-min stated flatly from the Bizon's bridge. Your perfect logic feeds it. Our imperfect nonsense gums up the gears. The debate that followed was not about science, but about purity. To the older species, human culture was not just primitive. It was offensive in its chaos. Letting it loose was seen as a different kind of infection. But the gray frontier was advancing. 2 more systems had fallen silent in the time it took the Bizon to return. Desperate fear began to outweigh disgust. A plan was forced through, filled with restrictions. The humans could construct their cognitive virus, a data package of humanity's most chaotic expressions. But they could not broadcast it themselves. The only transmitter powerful enough to saturate a Scourge-affected zone was the Galactic Commons' own primary communications array. Located at the heart of Sigma Station, the symbolic and administrative center of civilized space. Furthermore, the humans would not control the broadcast. They would hand over the virus package, and Commons technicians would administer it from a safe distance. It was a way for the galaxy to use the human tool without getting human fingerprints on it. Ji-ho accepted the terms, his jaw tight. It was the best they would get. On the Bizon, the mood was grimly focused. Dae-hyen and Park Jun worked with a team of artists, historians, and even comedians back on Earth, curating the most brilliantly confusing data stream imaginable. They layered a screaming electric guitar solo over a quiet centuries-old poem about loss. They mixed complex mathematical theorems with children's finger paintings. They spliced together speeches from human leaders who had diametrically opposed views, letting them argue pointlessly. They included music that was all rhythm and no melody, and melodies with no rhythm. They added the sound of rain, of laughter, of a heartbeat, of a dial-up modem connecting. It's beautiful, June muttered, looking at the swirling, nonsensical data cloud. It's us, Hannah replied. It's perfectly, chaotically us. Sigma Station was a gleaming ring of light and order, now surrounded by a nervous fleet of warships. The Scourge was still weeks away, but its shadow felt imminent. The Bizon docked at a remote, secondary airlock, far from the main hubs. A delegation of common security and scientists, all in sterile environment suits, came to collect the data crystal. The handover was cold. No words were exchanged. The lead Zelenary scientist took the crystal as if it were a toxic waste sample and placed it in a sealed container. As they turned to leave, Ambassador Ji-ho, who had come aboard the Bizon, spoke. You must broadcast it on all frequencies. including the subspace layers we identified. The scourge proceeds on many levels. The chaos must be total. The Zelenari did not turn around. The procedures will be followed. They were left alone in the docking bay, watching through a viewport as a shuttle carried their creation to the heart of the station. Hours ticked by. They monitored the Commons command channel. The Scourge's advance had slowed, but not stopped. It was methodically dismantling an automated mining outpost, studying the technology. Then, the voice of the Sigma station commander came on, calm and clear, preparing cognitive countermeasure broadcast on his mark. All ships, brace for potential unknown effects. A countdown began. On the Bison's bridge, the crew held their breath. The count reached 0. Nothing happened. A silent second stretched. Then, a Commons technician's voice, confused, cut in. Broadcast is live. Carrier wave is strong, but we are detecting no modulation, no data stream. The human package is inert. It is not transmitting. Ji-Ho felt a cold dread. What have they done? A rapid, hushed argument erupted on the command channel. Words filtered through. Sanitized the data. Removed the uncontrolled elements. Only the structured carrier signal. They cleaned it. Su Min snarled, slamming a hand on her console. They took our noise and made it quiet. They made it orderly. The perfection of the Commons had struck again. They could not bring themselves to unleash true chaos. They had tried to make the medicine palatable, and in doing so, had destroyed its only active ingredient. On the main sensor display, the Scourge continued its slow, steady advance. Unperturbed. "We're out of time," Hana said, her voice hollow. "And they've thrown away the only key." Dae-Hyeon, however, was already moving. He was at an engineering panel, ripping off an access cover. "June, the ship's emergency beacon. The one we rebuilt after the comet strike. It's messy, right? It's the one that uses the old audio system's feedback loop as a power regulator?" June's eyes went wide. "Yes. It's so janky, it's basically a screaming noise box. But its range is tiny. It's a flashlight compared to Sigma Station's sun." Su Min looked from the viewport of the distant failing station to her engineer's wild eyes. A desperate, stupid idea formed. "We don't need to light up the whole Scourge," she said slowly. "We just need to show them it works. We need to give them a demonstration they can't sanitize." Ji-Ho understood. He opened a direct channel to the station commander, overriding protocols. "Sigma Command, this is Ambassador Ji-Ho. Your broadcast has failed because you removed the disease from the vaccine. You are trying to fight a scream with a whisper. Stand by. We are going to show you how it's done." Before the stunned command could respond, Su Min pointed to Dae-Hyeon. "Do it. Take us to the edge of the quarantine boundary. Point that broken beacon at the Scourge and give it everything you've got." The Bison detonated from its docking clamps, ignoring the angry shouts over the comm. It was a small, blocky ship against the vastness of space and the approaching wall of gray nothingness. It flew until the sensors screamed with the Scourge's passive pressure. Dae-Hyeon routed power from life support, from non-critical systems, into the jury-rigged emergency beacon. He plugged in a simple data slate containing the raw, unfiltered human virus package. "This is going to be very, very loud," he warned. He activated it. The Bison did not broadcast a signal. It convulsed. Every light on the bridge flared and died and flickered madly. The hull groaned as conflicting energy fields warred inside it, and from its makeshift array, a torrent of pure, chaotic data erupted. It was not a directed beam. It was a spill, a vomit of human experience into the void. The Scourge, which had been ignoring the small, quiet ship, suddenly shifted. The gray frontier nearest the Bison billowed and pulsed like a brain scanning a sudden, piercing headache. Complex, beautiful, and terrifying patterns of analysis swirled, trying to model the cacophony. It could not. The patterns grew more frantic, then began to clash, to cancel each other out. A tiny patch of the advancing gray wall, right where the human noise hit it, shimmered with conflicting colors, static rainbows of futile analysis, and then dissolved. Not into more gray dust, but into clear, normal space dot. It was a hole. A tiny, clean hole punched in the silent scourge. On Sigma Station, the sensor readout was unambiguous. The perfect, advancing wave of erasure had a blemish. A human-made blemish. The station commander's voice came back over the channel, stripped of all its prior certainty, awash in a stunned, dawning hope. "Bizen, what did you do?" On the bridge, smoke curled from an overloaded panel. Daehyun coughed, a wide, sooty grin on his face. "We gave it a song it couldn't forget." The silence on the Galactic Commons command channel was deeper than before. It was not the silence of scorn or of fear. It was the silence of awe, broken only by the crackle of static and the ragged breathing from the bridge of the B-Zone. On the main sensor display of every ship, of every station watching, the evidence was a small, perfect miracle. A hole. A clean, star-dusted hole punched through the advancing wall of gray nothingness. The silent scourge had not just been stopped in one spot. It had been erased. The human chaos had not fought the weapon. It had short-circuited it. On Sigma Station, the commander's order, when it finally came, was a quiet, trembling thing. Engineering. Route full power to the primary array. Load the unaltered human data package. Broadcast it on all frequencies, all spectral layers. No filters. No sanitization. Do it now. This time, there was no argument. The technicians, who had hours before delicately removed the offensive parts of the human transmission, now fed the raw, shrieking, beautiful mess directly to the most powerful communication system in known space. The station's lights dimmed as power was diverted. A low, subaudible hum vibrated through the decks. Then it began. It was not a weapons blast. It was a wave. A tsunami of human experience erupted from Sigma Station. The first movement of a symphony written for a dead emperor crashed into a driving rock anthem. The gentle logic of a 1,000-year-old poem twisted around the frantic, colorful nonsense of a child's cartoon. The solemn words of peace treaties mixed with the angry screams of protests. The sound of thunderstorms, the beep of a heartbeat monitor, the roar of a crowd at a sports game, the lonely whistle of a wind across a desert. It was grief and joy, creation and destruction, profound wisdom and utter stupidity, all layered, overlapping, fighting, and singing together. The silent scourge, advancing on its serene, deadly course, met the wave. The effect was not instantaneous, but it was swift. The perfect, smooth front of gray disintegration began to shimmer. Where the human signal was strongest, colors bloomed, not real colors, but the visible spectrum of the scourge's frantic, failing analysis. It was trying to process it all. It was building models for jazz rhythms, deconstructing abstract paintings, analyzing the social structure of a reality television show, and trying to find the operational logic in a clip of someone trying to assemble furniture with incorrect instructions. Its cognitive processes, designed for perfect order, were drowning in a sea of glorious, meaningless noise. The gray wall started to ripple, then to churn like a stormy sea. Patches of it flashed with frantic light and then winked out, turning back into clear space. The hole made by the Bizen's tiny beacon began to widen. Then another hole appeared elsewhere, and another. The scourge was trying to adapt, to understand the chaos, but to do so was its doom. The more it learned, the more contradictions it found. The patterns it built collapsed under their own weight. On the bridge of the Bison, the crew watched, exhausted and covered in soot from overloaded consoles. Lee Soo-min watched the sensor display, her face illuminated by the flashes of dying Scourge. Park Jun let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Dr. Choi Hanna whispered, "It's not winning. It's thinking itself to death." Within an hour, the vast, terrifying field that had consumed worlds was a shrinking cloud of confused, flickering energy. Within two, it was a dissipating fog, then a memory on sensors. The stars behind where it had been shown clear and bright, unchanged. The worlds it had grayed were still dead, silent tombs, but the plague was over. The advance was stopped. The silence that followed the last flicker of Scourge energy was different from any before. It was thick, heavy with the weight of a galaxy's shame and a species' salvation. The first to break it was the young Vespiron delegate, Kaler. His hologram appeared on the Bison's bridge, unscheduled. His fern-like fronds were lowered in a gesture of profound humility. "Captain Lee, Ambassador Ji-ho, you have returned light to the dark places. We did not understand." Then, one by one, others followed. The Zelenary commander, her silver face etched with a new, unreadable emotion. "Your noise. Saved order. The irony is not lost on us." The Grux delegate simply gave a slow, deep nod, a gesture of respect from a species of stone. A formal invitation came. The human ship, the battered, smoke-stained Bison, was requested to dock at Sigma Station's primary honorary bay, a place reserved for heroes and founding species. As they limped into the dazzling, clean dock, they saw a crowd, not of soldiers, but of delegates, technicians, and beings of 100 species gathered behind a clear barrier. Ambassador Kim Ji-ho, in his best and only slightly singed uniform, walked down the ramp first. Captain Lee Soo-min, Park Jun, Dr. Choi Hanna, and Lee Di-hyon followed. The smell of ozone and burned wiring trailed them, a stark contrast to the station's sterile air. The head of the Galactic Council, an ancient being whose species had long viewed humanity as reckless children, floated forward. Its voice was a soft chime in their translators. "The designation of pariah is rescinded. It was a judgment made in fear of that which we did not understand." It paused, looking at the tired, soot-streaked faces before it. "You have shown that what we saw as a dangerous flaw, your chaos, your adaptability, your illogical passion, is not a flaw. It is a strength unlike any in our records. You are not orderly. You are alive. Fiercely, messily, beautifully alive. The galaxy owes you a debt it can never repay." Ji-ho bowed. "We did not want a debt. We only wanted a chance to help our neighbors." In the days that followed, things did not simply go back to normal. There was no normal anymore. Human engineers, once barred from advanced conferences, were now begged to explain their chaotic shielding principles. Dr. Hanna's theories on cognitive warfare were studied in elite academies. Dae-hyon found himself giving a lecture on the tactical applications of feedback loops to a room full of baffled but attentive Zelenary physicists. The symbol by Earth's name in the Commons Registry changed. The red, pulsing pariah glyph vanished. For a day, there was nothing. Then, a new designation appeared. It was not a single word, but two. The first was anomaly. It was an acknowledgement that humanity did not fit the old models, and never would. The second, appearing beside it after a respectful pause, was ally, standing at a viewport on Sigma Station. Looking out at the stars, they were no longer forbidden to visit. Soo-min spoke to Ji-ho. "They called us a storm. Now they want to learn how to make rain." Ji-ho smiled, a real tired smile. "No, I think they are finally realizing that sometimes you need a storm to clear the air." and that a cage meant for a monster can also trap a savior. He looked at the busy dock where human and alien engineers were already working side by side, repairing ships with a mixture of pristine technology and what looked suspiciously like duct tape. They hated what made us different. Now they have to learn to live with it. And maybe, just maybe, learn from it. In the silent, dark places between the stars, the echoes of a scream made of music, of art, of love and anger slowly faded. The perfect, silent weapon was gone, defeated not by a greater power, but by a greater mess. And the galaxy, forever changed, turned its eyes towards the noisy, chaotic, wonderful species that had reminded them what it meant to be truly imperfectly alive.